Guys, it's Manga Time once again, here to bring you my review of Bleach 676, Horn of Salvation. Can I just say I called it? I literally called exactly how this chapter would begin. Almost panel for panel, exactly how this chapter would start. Last week I said that Orihime would be the first reaction, and that she would see Ichigo, and she would see his horn, and she would get a flashback to the dome. Which we get. We get her looking at him worriedly, she sees the horn, she flashbacks to the dome, and she gets all scared. And then Ichigo would turn around and reveal he's just his normal self. Admittedly, I said we get a full body shot, but we get a double page spread. I'm happy with that. Basically, I called panel for panel how the start of this chapter would go, and I don't know, what does that mean? Is Bleach really that predictable, or have I just spent way too much time with this series? Anyway, so yeah, basically, Orihime gets... I like that, though. It's a nice character moment. We get a shout back to the dome. It is still one of the kind of... what's the word I'm looking for? Most dramatic character moments in the series so far. You know, Ichigo lost control of himself for the first time ever, really. Obviously, there was the time with the Vizard trailing, but that was in a more controlled environment. This time, he lost control of himself. He almost killed Uryu. And yes, it's believable that it is something that they would always remember, and something that would crop up again. So yeah, I was very happy to see it, but it is also very nice to see Ichigo has changed. And basically, he is his normal self. Having said that, getting a better look at the design. In some ways it does look better this week, in some ways it still looks a bit stupid. The one horn deal is still a bit dumb. It does still look a bit dumb. Although, I mean, I get it though. It's a very literal visual representation of the half and half power thing going on. So yeah, it's interesting. The title is very interesting as well. Horn of Salvation. It's literally talking about his horn being the salvation. I think, you know, he does look cool. This chapter is interesting. It's actually probably one of the better chapters we've had lately, although it's very, very short. Very short. That's because Kubo uses a record, I'm pretty sure it's a record, of four double-page spreads in this chapter. A total of 8 pages in the chapter. Out of there's only 17 pages per chapter as well, remember, so that's insane. But anyway, yeah. So Ichigo's like, yo, I'm fine, it's me. And Orihime's like, oh Christ, he's alright. And he's like, you know, this time I'm still me, so relax, it's fine. And I really like that. I think that's really good. It shows Ichigo's character growth. It shows how far he's come. And honestly, for those of us who've been reading the series for a long time, obviously if you do read Bleach, this is a big moment for you. But for those of us who have really followed Ichigo's journey, you know, since like before the dome, so all that, through his troubles with his hollow and his Shinigami powers and now his Quincy powers and everything, it's almost liberating to finally get to this point now that we've all been, you know, expecting for so long. That Ichigo has essentially mastered his powers. I mean, he hasn't quite done it, but he's got the complete hybridization going on, and it's so almost rewarding to finally see it. You know, finally see it. And he even explains to us in depth, about as deep as Ichigo gets, what, you know, the details of his power. And while we have had it inferred to us for hundreds of chapters now, it's nice to finally hear it from the horse's mouth. This is what I wanted. Actual talking. So Yhwach says, you know, your resemblance to a hollow is striking. Is this the hollow form you take when you meld yourself with your power? And Ichigo's like, yeah, it is. And he says, you know, the Quincy powers that I inherited from my mother, old man Zangetsu, and the Shinigami powers that I inherited from my father, the hollow within me. So right, that's it, right there. If you were in any way confused by Ichigo's power, which is fine because Ichigo's power is a bit of a clusterfuck, that's it right there. I mean, I know, like I said, we've had it basically told to us before, and all of us knew this, but it's just nice to hear it from Ichigo himself. He says, you know, while constantly at odds with each other, those two have finally found balance. And as Zangetsu, I reforged these two swords. Now, this could be dodgy translation, but I do like, if this is the case, Ichigo referring to himself as Zangetsu. Obviously a nice little callback to the blade is me. It also appears that Ichigo has a hollow hole, which is interesting. Could just be a marking, but it looks like a hollow hole to me. Unfortunately, we don't really get a great look at him. I mean, we do see like close-ups of his face and stuff, but actually Ichigo himself, we don't really get a great look at. But I like the fact that his big Zanpakuto toe is now white. That's actually really cool. Anyway, then Ichigo explains, if they remain under control while the balance between them is maintained, then it stands to reason they should come forth as the balance is destroyed. So basically, yeah, whenever Ichigo has unleashed enormous amounts of his Shinigami and Hollow powers, the Hollow form has always taken over. And so Ichigo says, to be honest, it would be a lot more convenient if I could draw this out of will. Also, interestingly, his sandals have been obliterated. I think that's just a funny... I don't know why Kubo's done that, considering most of his other clothes are fine, but it is interesting to see that his shoes have just been destroyed. But he says, I'm still very far from mastering that, which is why I used your power to give me that nudge. And I would really like that if that was a callback to when Ichigo used Kurge's Reiatsu to break out of the jail, and he learned from that, and he now used it against Yhwach himself. That would actually be really cool. That's not mentioned, but that's what I'm going to infer. I just want to take another brief moment to talk a bit about Ichigo, how he looks. I'm not sure I really like his hair standing up. It looks pretty weird, and we're all kind of used to Ichigo having hair over his face. But he does look cool with the one hollow eye going on. Actually, it does look cooler than I thought it might. So when Ichigo says this, Yhwach just has a bit of a nasty smile on his face. I assume a lot of people are theorising that Yhwach wants to take over Ichigo's body for some reason at some point down the line, and he's happy to see that Ichigo is basically becoming that perfect vessel. I could believe that, although I don't know why Yhwach would necessarily need to give up his body, unless if he gives up his body, maybe he gives up the drawback that he has to keep taking in souls, or else he'll turn into a child again. That's very possible. But at the same time, how does he give up his body? How does transferring himself to a vessel even work? We have absolutely no idea. But literally, that has never been brought up in the story. It just seems highly likely that either Ichigo or Uryu are being groomed to be a vessel for Yhwach if that happens. But it might not actually happen, but that's just basically the principal theory at the moment. Ichigo is now so fast, apparently, that he appears right in front of Orihime without her even noticing. And he says to her, he's like, I like that Ichigo doesn't tell her to, go or anything, because obviously, if you remember, Ichigo has a habit of, when he gets powerful, telling people to just, get out of the way, don't fight or anything like that. But he says, he's like, let's spread out a little bit, keep defending my Reiatsu, and then, but also keep yourself safe. That's fair enough, but he basically, he doesn't tell her to go, he just says, just keep defending me. She's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Which Ichigo unleashes some pretty colossal Reiatsu, which destroys the entire top of Silbern. Literally, if you see, it's actually kind of hard to make out because of the way the smoke is, but in the bottom part of the panel, Yhwach is literally standing with his throne. There's a bit of wall behind him to which the flag is attached to, and then there's nothing else. Literally, the sky is around them, which actually is pretty cool. So they are now basically fighting literally at top of Varvelt. There's no walls or anything, so that's quite cool. Yhwach then draws the sword, the very same sword that killed Yama. And he says, I suppose the time has come for me to draw my sword. And we get our third double-page spread of the chapter. And it's possibly the coolest one. Ichigo literally is lunging towards Yhwach now. And it's a very animalistic, brutal fighting style. And it's very similar to how Yhwach fought Ichigo in the first invasion, when he fucking grabbed him and slammed him on the floor and stuff. So, yeah, I think it's actually really... It's really quite... Again, refreshing to see Ichigo fighting like this. It's refreshing to see him at a level of power that we have felt like he should have been at for a while now. A lot of people were disheartened to see him get absolutely fucking owned by Askin, not, what was it, 20 chapters ago? So, yeah, it's cool to see Ichigo, being as powerful as the ultimate hybrid should be. So he basically just fucking grabs Yhwach's hand before Yhwach can even bring out his sword, and he just kind of swings his sword downwards. A couple of very dynamic and pretty awesome looking pages, I have to be honest. Ichigo, yeah, he just jumps at Yhwach, grabs him before he can even bring out his sword, and brings down his blade. Interestingly, Yhwach, the strange black, whatever it is, over Yhwach's face begins to disappear, and you see his eyes. And I have to admit, he almost looks worse now. Like, I know that's hard to say, considering he used to have nothing covering his face. He used to have his face covered. But he now looks like he's wearing some weird hat. But anyway, yeah, so Ichigo tries to hit him, and basically there's an enormous explosion, but we see that Yhwach manages to actually catch the blade and stop it. So that's pretty cool. But basically, yeah, Yhwach's like, surely you jest. With that meager strength, your blade could never hope to pierce me. Again, that's a bit weird, unless it's a translation issue, because literally, like 3 pages ago, Yhwach was like, magnificent power, or whatever, so, yeah. But again, like I said, Yhwach looks possibly even weirder now with the way his head is. But, before I forget, I just want to bring it up. Obviously, Yhwach's not using the Almighty, which is why he only has 1 pupil. But I was thinking to myself, like, it seems like, why is the black, let's just call it meshing or whatever, on his head disappearing? Why is it disappearing? Now, I was thinking, is it to help him see better? Like, is that literally stopping him from seeing better? Probably not. But there's got to be a reason for it. It must be a visual representation of something. Is it a visual representation of Ichigo using Yhwach's own power? So basically it's kind of being sapped away? Maybe. But it seems interesting to me that Yhwach's veil, that's a word, veil is disappearing, and he has 1 eye. 1 pupil. So, I'm wondering, what if somehow, through some weird turn of events that's probably not going to happen, but this is a crack theory, so hear me out, they both return to prior forms. So Yhwach somehow ends up looking like shorter hair, normal eyes, and Ichigo somehow ends up looking like old Ichigo, and we end up playing into Yhwach's vision. That's literally the first thing that came to my mind when I saw Yhwach's regular eye popping out again. I was like, maybe Kubo's taking us back somehow to play out Yhwach's vision, but that probably isn't happening. But it's just something I wanted to bring up because I thought it was potentially interesting. But anyway, Yhwach attempts to try and strike Ichigo, and he basically sends him flying. And Ichigo's like, he's been hit, and he goes flying backwards. And he then starts to summon what looks like a Getsuga Tensho. Yhwach's like, Getsuga, a different approach with the same predictable result. But however, Ichigo reveals that he's not just doing a Getsuga Tensho. And this is actually pretty cool, I'm not going to lie. This is pretty cool. So there's a strange kind of distortion in the air, and it's obviously Gran Rey Cero, because there's no other Cero that's ever looked like that before, with the strange prongs coming off it and twisting round. So Ichigo is summoning a Cero with his horn, and he's summoning a Getsuga with his blade. It's actually kind of weirdly drawn at this point. I don't know why, but for some reason it's almost quite hard to make out what's going on. There's a lot of white, there's not a huge amount of shading, but at the same time, it's cool. But anyway, Yhwach's like, this isn't a normal Getsuga Tensho, he's fused something together with the Getsuga, and you see basically his horn and his sword acting together, and that is quite cool, because obviously he's missing his other horn, so it's pretty cool to see him do this. Then we get our 4th double page spread. Ichigo uses Gran Rey Cero. Interesting, he doesn't call it Getsuga. I assume Ichigo's using his own blood to fuel the Gran Rey Cero, because you do have to do that, and he is bleeding, and it's flying up into the sword, so I assume that's what he's doing. Anyway, he then says Gran Rey Cero, and basically this enormous fucking arc of light seems to cut straight into Yhwach, and that's the end of the chapter. There's a couple of things I want to bring up here. First and foremost, Ichigo appears to have a hollow mask forming on his face. That's probably the most important thing I can think of right now. I don't know if maybe it's the scans, but I do think it's unmistakable that there is a hollow mask forming around his mouth. Now, I don't actually reckon that's going to stay there. I think that's just a visual representation of him using the Hollow's power. Very cool that you can actually use Gran Rey Cero. That is cool. But yeah, that's something else I want to bring up. For us long-time readers, so how long have we waited for Ichigo to actually be able to willingly use a Cero in his regular form? That is so cool. If he just starts firing off Ceros left, right, and centre, that is going to be wicked cool. Another thing as well is this Gran Rey Cero actually looks like it's cut Yhwach in half. I don't reckon it will have. I reckon this is probably just going to be... It's either going to be done for imagery's sake, and he's actually going to be okay, but it's just been slashed. Or he has actually been cut in half, but he's now more kind of Reiatsu than man, if that makes sense. Because Yhwach has lately been basically just an ebbing and flowing black Reiatsu, which one can assume is still Quincy Reiatsu since Ichigo used it to power his power. Power his power. So yeah, it actually wouldn't surprise me if Yhwach was more akin to like a wraith at this point, and somehow I don't know. Honestly, there's so much weird shit going on with Yhwach. Interestingly, in the last panel, he almost looks like he's smiling at getting hit. But yeah, I don't really know. We have to wait till next week because the chapter is already over. But it's cool to see, I have to admit as well, that Yhwach becoming this huge black cloak, essentially, is quite a cool visual representation of the Soul King's power. I do personally feel like you get the impression that he is, like, really strong, just from looking at him. But yeah, that's it for the chapter this week, guys. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10, mostly because of what I was saying. I love the rewarding feeling of being, you know, a reader and finally seeing... This is what everyone's been waiting for so long, for Ichigo to master his Hollow and Shinigami powers, and summon them in some kind of visual representation, and then kick ass with them, and actually use a Cero and stuff like that. It's, again, nice to see that the kind of bullshit that came before this, where Ichigo was, like, raging and attacking Yhwach for no reason, has actually meant something, and Ichigo had a plan the whole time, and it's just cool. It's really cool to see. It actually seems like, just quickly, looking at the final page, that Ichigo's Hollow mask is only forming inside the marking, which is cool. But yeah, so a lot of people again have also said that this is clearly still Ichigo's Shikai, I assume. It's not Bankai, so maybe this is him akin to wearing a Hollow mask these days. I don't really know. But yeah, let me know in the comments below, guys, what you thought of this week's chapter. Do you like Ichigo's new form? Do you think it's, you know, is it awesome seeing him like this and kicking ass? And what do you think Yhwach's up to next week? He's obviously not dead. And that brings me to another point very quickly. You have to wonder if Kubo actually thinks he's got people with a lot of these cliffhangers half the time, I think. Because we've seen it so many times before where someone gets hurt and they're not actually that hurt. You know, this will come back to bite me next week if Yhwach is like fucking cut in half or something. Which he could very well be. But if he comes out of it with just like a nick, you know, Kubo can't be sitting there thinking, yeah, they definitely think Yhwach is about to die. So, you know, oh well. Let me know, guys, in the comments below, like I said, what you thought this week's chapter. Don't forget to subscribe. I'd super appreciate the support, and give the video a thumbs up. That would be awesome. Until next time, though, guys, see you later. Whoops.